Hello and welcome to the Small YouTuber Show. My name's Johnny and I am joined by my very good friend LD. How are you doing?
Hey, I'm good, man. No
Yeah, how's it been? A
complaints.
good week for you?
Brilliant week. Yep.
Yes.
Mhm.
Now, I just want to add from the very beginning that we are not experts in geopolitics or in economics or any of the isms you can possibly think of. It's just two guys who like to talk about current affairs. Is that a good summation, LD?
I'd say probably say it again. Yeah, just for those at the
Just to
back.
reiterate,
Yeah, definitely.
because I don't want the hate.
No.
We are experienced
But we
in
like
life.
debate though. We like
But
debate,
we love
so
exactly that. We love
that's
a good
cool.
discussion. There is nothing wrong with that. And we're people of the world. We look at we've got our eyes open. We can see the things that are on around us, and it's always nice to be able to have a discussion. And we're actually fortunate enough that in the world we live in now, I haven't got to come around to your house and hang out. We can do it
Exactly.
electronically.
There you go. There you go.
And then, hey, how about having a live stream show and then sharing our debate and discussion? And if you are enjoying this, or you think that this is something you can take part in, holler at us in the comments section. There may be a question that you may be able to we may say something wrong. If we say something wrong, correct us. If we say something correct, give us a thumbs up. Hit that thumbs up for us. And if you're new to our channel, please consider subscribing. So today's show is going to be talking about BRICS, not the stuff that makes buildings, but the entity that builds economies. Now, I know that this is probably not the common subject that people are talking about, but I genuinely believe that this is something that we should be talking about in 2024. Would you agree with that, LD?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's going to be something that we will be talking about sooner or later. It's a train that's moving, and yeah, a lot of countries are getting on board. So
exactly. Yeah. So without further ado, let's just get straight into it. I would imagine that if you don't know what BRICs are, we should probably explain it and probably explain who they are. So I've got this lovely picture that I've put up on the screen. Even with the countries, BRICS stands for Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. And those 5 countries combined at this moment in time make up 23% of the world's GDP. So we're not talking about a small group of nations. We're talking about a very sizable group of nations that make a lot of money and are definitely big in the geopolitical world that we are in today. If we'd like to add anything to that before we carry on.
yeah, I mean, it was to start with, it was a brick, right?
BRIC, that's right.
So
Yeah, correct. Yes.
yeah, I think like in 2006 or 2007, Brazil, Russia, India, China they're the founding members.
Yeah.
And then South Africa joined like 2010, 2011.
Yeah.
So they are the beginning, but there's 5 more countries that have
Well, we're going to
joined.
get to that. We will
Yeah.
get to that.
Okay.
So to put it into context, when we mention BRIC or BRICS, as we've started talking around, this originally was not an organized unit like, say, the G7 or the G20. The actual term BRIC was coined by the economist Jim O'Neill from Goldman and Sachs. He was told.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, he was told. So he was he was part of their asset management team on potential foreign investment strategies now and up until 2050. So he's looking around these markets thinking, well, we've just had we're having some financial issues. We're putting a lot of money where we've got some booms, some busts about to come. Where can we invest in emerging markets? And the timescale was, say, from 2001 to 2050. And those countries are ones that basically were the ones that we highlighted. Now, what's interesting is Russia. So, I can understand Brazil, in India, to a lesser extent China at the time, because China was still part of that emerging, and obviously Russia was already there. It was already a very sizable country. It was very, very big. But the powers that be, especially the economists and the strategists at Goldman Sachs, could see that there was even bigger revenue to be had from the Russian market, because they have vast amounts of land that are just untouched,
Untapped. Yeah. Yep.
completely untapped. There are vast amounts of natural resources in the country that at the moment are still sitting there doing nothing. So
Yep.
they were looking at Russia and saying, well, this is definitely a place that by 2050 will be 100% one of those emerging markets we need to be looking at investing and putting money into those countries. Now, keeping in mind, that was 2001. A lot has happened since then, as we well know, but we will get into that. So, as we said, the concept of the BRICs was not formalized. It was just on someone's paperwork at Goldman Sachs. And that is where it laid, pretty much in someone's notebook in terms of figures and this, that, and the other, until 2006. And it said that the foreign ministers from Brazil, Russia, India, and China, where you say BRIC, they met in New York. They talked to each other. It's funny. They were said, some random guy at Goldman Sachs says that we're all together. And they were like, yeah. Hey, why don't we maybe talk a bit more? Because if we are emerging, how about it? But what was interesting was what happened in 2006 at the bigger level.
Yeah.
Financial crashes. There were lots of things going on in the financial world.
It was just starting, because it culminated with 2008. But there was tremors before that.
But the tremors were there from 2006. And I would imagine that those foreign ministers and their economic strategists were saying, I think that the worldwide economy is overheating. And at the present moment in time, we have to still do all of our business with the American dollar. So, in my country, I don't use dollars, but I need to buy dollars to be able to work with you. And you need to buy dollars to work with me. That probably was the beginning of that conversation around, could we do business with each other without the dollar? Who knows?
It's crazy to think. It's crazy to think that was just brought about by a banker, essentially.
100%. The whole concept was just
I thought it would have been that.
No, it was an
like
economist
Putin's brainchild or something. Okay.
So there wasn't any official diplomatic meeting or connection between either of these countries until 2009. And they formally had a BRIC summit, not BRICS, BRIC. Brazil, Russia, India, and China in South Africa in 2009. And they focused on global economic improvements, financial institution reform, and future cooperation between the countries. Because up until that moment, any kind of financial aid, especially if it was through the IMF, these countries were saying, you spend a lot of your money, but you don't invest in us. And so the four nations said, could we mimic what is being done already with the G7, the G20? And we're not part of that group, even though obviously Russia was part of it. The other countries weren't. And they were sort of like, we're missing out on the gold mine, and we're going to talk about the G7 later on in greater detail, because the BRIC in many ways is almost like the heads to tails of the G7. There was because up until then there was no competition. The G20 and the G7 nations, they just ran it all.
And also, I'm thinking that even if Russia was part of the G7 or G20, they probably wouldn't have had the allies that America or the UK would have had.
Yeah.
So it's kind of tilted against them in a sense. So
Yeah.
with this now, you have way more say in the direction of this new alliance.
And
Mm,
when you
mm, mm,
imagine that the G7 countries were Canada, France, Germany, Italy, Japan, UK, and the USA, and as a, a non-participating member, the European Union. Well, all of those countries that we've just mentioned, pretty much the old guard.
yep.
When you think about it, they're like the
Exactly.
old guard of nations
Yep.
that survived. Obviously, I add Germany to that, but when you think that up until 1945 there was opposing nations because we're fighting each other, then in 1946 there was only one world power,
Yep.
which was the Americans. And
Hmm.
they shaped the world in their image, which, why wouldn't you? You're the world
Yep.
power. You could do
Exactly.
whatever you want, you know.
And they did.
And they did. And
Mm,
we have seen the results of that come full circle almost. It's quite interesting. I love history, and I always find it fascinating how things happen that seem good.
mm.
You know, the Bretton Woods discussion was about finance and about having a currency that we're not going to end up fighting each other. We're going to end up working together, but there had to be one that was better than the equals.
Mm.
You know, there had to be one.
But it's also a case of just human nature and the way that
Yeah,
empires rise and fall.
yeah,
This tends to be cyclical.
yeah.
So
And
you
and
know,
and just as a side note, when everybody's economies in those days was pegged to gold, you knew that you could only spend as much as the gold that you had.
mm,
Well, obviously, when when the Europeans could see, well, the Americans are spending quite a lot of money in Vietnam and space programs, and they're doing a lot of investing. Do they have that amount of gold? Oh, let's pull our gold out.
mhm.
Obviously, Nixon was like, no, we're going to unplug, we're going to basically remove ourselves from gold so that we can just basically print money forever.
Wow.
And obviously, from that moment on, there's been a massive uptake in everything being more expensive and,
Yep.
and in general. Well, if you're not part of that inner club of the G7 and to a great extent the G20,
Mhm.
you're not, if you're not benefiting from it, you're not part of the club, so you can't you're not benefiting. In fact, you're probably doing worse. And when the IMF come and they start giving you money to help you build your nation, but you've
Oh,
got
the
to pay this,
bailouts.
but
Mhm.
but you've got to pay us back with the potential profits of your children, and your children's
Grandchildren.
children.
Yep.
And so I can totally understand whereby BRIC would come into existence. You could just see it.
Mhm.
Eventually someone's going to say, enough is enough. I don't like this. I want something better for my family, for my country. I
Yep.
want to be able to do the things that you do without having to rely on having to have a reserve of American dollars in my bank, in my
Yep.
central bank. So when with that, keeping all of that in mind, those groups in 2009, they met together and they discussed all these things. And obviously South Africa joined just a little while later. But the reason for this discussion that we're having today is quite interesting. Do you remember what happened about 2 or 3 days ago when we first said we were going to talk about this?
Um, I don't. I've got a bad memory. Go for it.
So we were talking, and I said to you, oh, hold on, let me just put this down. Sorry, 1 second. I said to you, isn't it interesting that there are certain countries now that are talking about not using the dollar to be able to
Oh,
fund?
right. Yes. Yes.
So
Yes.
do you
Yes.
remember I
Yep.
sent you?
Yeah. You sent me a link, didn't you? Yeah.
Yes, I did.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm. Mhm.
It's quite interesting because when I saw that, the first thing I said to myself was, "Whoa, that's quite serious."
Mm,
Don't you think that's quite a serious thing to be open about it? You know, it's one thing to say, it's one thing to be like, "Oh yeah, we'll do it," but when you're actively saying, "Yeah, we're going to do this,"
mhm.
well, it was quite. I'll get it up on the screen. Um,
And I think
yeah.
if
So,
I'm not mistaken, this wasn't the first. This was I think China and Russia did a gas deal a few years back, because I looked into it,
all right.
and they conducted it all in the Chinese currency, and it was to the tune of like
Really?
something like $450 billion. Yeah, yeah,
That's insane. Yeah, I saw this. I just thought it's amazing that BRICS are urging the Middle East to ditch. They're
mm.
getting brave. I
They're getting
saw. I
brave. They're
saw.
getting brave, but America's not ready to just roll over and play dead, though, are they?
No,
So,
but still,
but this is
I
this is a
saw.
sign of the times. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
definitely.
I saw that, and I thought to myself, it's one thing to have a discussion around nations building um their economies. That there's no
Mhm.
issue there. You know, you have
Yeah, yeah,
sovereignty
yeah,
over
yeah.
your own country. If you
Yep.
want to improve your economy, then you have every right to, as so long as you play by the rules. And the rules were that you will do all of your purchasing power with the dollar.
Yeah.
And that's been the 100% rule. There is no
That's on its
deviating
way
from
out.
that.
That's
Yeah,
on its way out.
there's no deviating from that. That has been the reality forever.
Mm,
You
mm.
can play you can play ball, you can do what you want in your economies, but when it comes to buying oil, you will be using the dollar to do it,
But
which seems quite strange.
do you not think that it's countries that are way more solvent than the US looking at how much money they owe and
Yeah,
the real value of their dollar? Do you see
yeah.
what I mean? So they're probably thinking, well, it's a new dawn. Let's
Well,
we
this is
can.
this is why I said originally that with the G7, it was like the old guard, and these emerging nations are now saying we don't need we don't need you to hold our hand anymore. We are big economies. We know how to handle our affairs. Why do I need to use a foreign currency to do my business? And I
Mm,
think when I saw that and I sent it to you and I said, I think this is something we could definitely speak about, because it's where, and it didn't say China said this, and it
yep.
didn't say Russia said this. It said BRICS. So
Hmm.
they were uniform
Speaking with one voice. Yeah.
as
Yeah.
one voice.
Hmm.
And in the same way that if you if you're if you take on one of the one country in the block of, like, say, um the G7, you take them all on,
Hmm.
especially at an economic level.
Yeah.
But what was interesting, when I was doing the research, is I thought to myself, well, BRICS can't really be a solid base, because even within that group, there is competition. India and China are at competition, 100% competition. There's been outbreaks of fighting between the two countries in the northern parts of India, Kashmir, and certain areas that are the borders are not haven't been decided, and so they fight over it. Which is funny, because in one sense they fight against that, but then in the
Mm,
other end they will want to do business with each other.
yep.
And when you think about the Chinese economy, it's massive, and we're going to go through some of the figures in a while. India, their economy is huge, huge, and most importantly, and I must admit, I was trying to get this research before. Oh, good morning. Yep, good morning. Life with the Glovers. Hello, welcome to the stream. How are
Yeah.
you
Good
doing? Thank
morning.
you very much for popping in. And I love your vlogs, guys. Really, really, really cool, guys. LD, they do some amazing trips all around
Okay.
the world. They like to do cruises and whatnot, and it's really, really cool. So thank you
Okay.
so much for popping. I really do appreciate that.
Where are they
Yeah,
based? Over here.
I think based in the States somewhere.
Okay.
So
Okay.
I'm not quite sure where, but
Good morning.
it's a new channel to me. So I've been watching their videos over the last couple of weeks and be like, oh, I really like that.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for being in here, and you can put the thumbs up for us. Would really, really do appreciate that. The topic for this discussion is about BRICS. Now, I don't know if this is something that is discussed in America, but obviously the BRICS are now a world force, and they are 100% here to stay. That that quote I mentioned about the percentage of their GDP, especially the world percentage. Another
28%.
yeah, and 23%, I believe. Another statistic is the birth rate of many of those countries. Hello, this is my cooking lifestyle. Hello, welcome to the stream. Thank you so much for
Welcome.
being here. If you could hit the thumbs up for me, I really, really do appreciate it. Whereabouts, what countries are you in? Could you put that in the stream for me? I would love to hear of your opinions of, especially if you've heard the term the BRICS nations. I'd love to know what your opinions are of the group that has now, is now a world leader. So by all means, please share your comments with us, and we'll be able to maybe engage with you. So thank you so much for being here. So what I was saying was that their populations are growing.
Yep.
So their economies are growing, whilst the G7 economies is shrinking, and so is their. They're not making babies.
Yeah.
They're not
Yeah.
making babies. Which is, you think to yourself, wow, I wouldn't even think of it
Cali.
on that level.
Okay. Yeah.
Are they from Cali? Ah, right. Oh man. Well, I would love to. I've not been there.
Beautiful.
Have you been to Cali, Lee?
Only on stop off.
Oh, okay. No, I've not been there before. It's always definitely somewhere where I'd love to visit. It's funny when you see videos from people that film in Cali. It's always sunny. It's just beautiful.
Yeah.
Just sunny, and there's always
Palm trees, everything.
palm
Yeah.
trees, and just enjoying a different way of life. Instead of when we're in London, it's not nowhere near as we do get some good summers, but I wish we had even better.
Today's pretty sunny, so
yeah, it's not bad, not bad. So
you think it's correlated? The
100%.
idea that the birth rate is declining, the economy declines,
and so the economies are definitely going to be affected. There's just no doubt about that. Just to give you some basic facts, and this is the gross domestic product of the BRICS at the moment is 26.3 trillion. That's a lot of money. The G7 though is 45.9 trillion. So at the present moment in time, as it stands, so we're going to talk about other nations in a moment, so hold that thought. But as just with the BRICS, just with those 5 originals, 26.3 trillion. Their share of the global GDP is 16%, but the G7 is 30%. But now hear about this. The BRICS nations cover 40% of the world population, whilst the G7 only covers 30%. So when you imagine that some of those African nations, they have no old people, they are just young, and they're producing babies, their economies are going to explode, which, as we said at the very beginning of the live stream, when the economist from Goldman and Sachs was talking about 2050 as a pivotal moment, he could see world populations in the developed nations is declining. World populations in the emerging markets is increasing. How can Goldman and Sachs still make money?
That's going to be the bottom line every
that's
time.
Going to be the ultimate. How can Goldman Sachs still make money? We need to basically tiptoe into those in markets now,
emerging
dominate
markets.
those
Yeah.
markets now
Hmm.
before the BRICS nations learn that they can do it for themselves.
Mm.
Well, obviously, all of this was happening in 2009. We've had we had the financial meltdown with the subprime mortgages. We've had banks fail. We've had nations fail. We've had COVID. We've had so many
Bailouts, everything. Yeah. Yeah.
bailouts. So the whole scene
Mm.
of this world that we see has completely changed.
Yep.
Completely changed. It's decimated in many ways the G7 nations. They're nowhere near as strong and as dominant as
Mm.
they were recently. France has been pretty much kicked out of Africa
Yeah.
because they had their own monopoly on the printing of the money in many of
Oh,
the Western.
CIF, the
Yeah.
francs. Yep. Yep. Hmm.
Imagine, I did not know. It's funny. I only found this out once they got kicked out.
Yep. Do you know
But
that they received something like, I think it was 500 billion a year from about 14 African nations
it's
every year?
insane.
Yeah,
It is insane.
that's crazy.
And what it tells you is these nations will never be able to grow.
Mm.
If you are dragging a milestone of debt, you're never going
Yep,
to be able to run far. You just can't.
that's
If
true.
you're holding that debt, you know, you're never going to be able to. Which is
Mm.
why when those BRIC nations met, they were talking about um, ways to untether themselves from the current market system,
Hmm.
which is now why they have their own banks, they have their own their equivalent of the IMF. They have that
So yeah, that was called the New Development Bank, I believe,
new
right?
development bank, yeah,
And they've
and
lent to for the infrastructure, roads, bridges,
yeah,
railways, water
yeah,
supply, etc.
and
For all
and the
these nations.
and the sad thing about it is, and I don't know if this is something that you've noticed, is there are many nations now who are not looking to the G7 nations for help because they realize you help us, we sacrifice our future.
Yep.
I'm not saying that the BRICS nations aren't going to have the same model.
I was just going to say
You know, you
it's.
can't. Yeah, I'm not going to say that because
Mm.
that would be very silly of me. Because the BRICS again is a business. They will still
Yep.
want to make profits. They'll still want to grow their own coffers. So they're going to still have to do all those things. But it just feels like there's a shift change because now they have choice.
Mm.
See, you know, as we said, up
Sorry to
until
cut you. I think what's happened when I speak to people in Africa, what
yeah,
I find is that they see China as approaching them in a much more collaborative way.
mm-hmm,
Whereas when, say, the G7 nations approach them, it's more
dictation.
you're here, we're here, and this
Mm,
is how the deals are dictated to them.
mm-hmm,
I mean, the outcome is probably going to be roughly the same in
yeah.
both situations, but the perception is that it's a much more equal relationship or more equal dynamic between the two.
So what was you know, obviously I know that you've done business in many countries in Africa, on the continent, shall we say.
Mhm.
What is there a you know, are they embracing the whole BRICS concept with open arms, or is there apprehension? What kind of what have you noticed?
I would say that people are welcoming to it,
Right.
but sometimes there have been some incidences, more anecdotal, where some of the Chinese who may have moved over have behaved
Hmm.
in a way that was disrespectful. And so, therefore, I mean, but that was going back a few years. I'd say now, um, if a Chinese corporation wants to do business in a particular country,
Yeah.
the country now says, okay, you can come in, but you're training up our people. So they
But
have what's called
is that
local content.
is that actually though BRICS as in the entity, or is that say, because
Okay, so it's more China at
yeah,
the moment.
do you get
I'm
what I
going
mean?
back a
Because
few. Yeah. I don't think they're moving as an entity into Africa just yet. Typically,
mm,
you see Chinese corporations going in for the most
yeah.
part.
So if we sort of like um and as I said, we are not experts in geopolitics or even in, we are people that observe what's going on in the world that we live in. Our eyes are opened. And so we're not going to just take in what we see. We'll probably do our research on it. That's part of the reason why even the subject for this discussion was about, will the BRICS nations, is that now the end? Are we now looking at the first, um, you know, warnings to the G7 that not only is there a new player in the game, but it's a player that could potentially win the game? And so I want to add, where is it? So I think it's this photo here on the right. If we can you see that there? It says that the
Yep.
new members
Okay,
of
they joined last year, didn't they? Yes.
yeah. So
Mhm.
we've got. I mean, I know I've got loads of pictures up, so I can only apologize. But on the right hand side, you can see that you've got the originals, like as in the top layer. But then there is Saudi Arabia, Argentina, Egypt, Ethiopia, Iran, and the UAE. These are all countries that are now stepping potentially part of that family.
Okay, so just a side note,
Yeah.
they are all members now. They are
Oh, they're all
members
members
as
now.
of 2024, except Argentina.
Right. Okay.
Argentina withdrew their membership.
Oh, I wonder why they did that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I mean, don't get me wrong.
Well, they're in down south, so maybe look up north. Maybe, yeah.
You
I'm
know what?
pretty sure that's why.
It's funny. I always find it interesting when I look at the politics of South America,
Mm,
because they have such a strong northern neighbor.
yep,
They are very. It's more difficult for them to play ball, to not play ball potentially if there's a problem, because regime change can
yep.
happen very swiftly, especially in those
But
nations. And during the
it'd be the same as imagine Taiwan joining
mm,
America with something, and they're sitting on China's doorstep. So it's
yeah, and
the
it's fun.
same thing.
That's a very very good example. Yeah,
Mm,
and so those nations are now part of it. Now, just to give you an idea, that now means that the gross domestic product has now shot up
yep.
exponentially. Um,
It's
if
actually 20. It's up to 28.5 trillion now
yeah,
currently.
28.5.
Yep.
So it puts it all into perspective. You are now looking at over a quarter of the world gross domestic product
Yep.
from this group, but they represent 40%. The two most populous nations in the world, China and India, are both in that group.
Mm,
Just imagine if you had your own business, right, LD? You had your own business and you managed to break into um, the Indian market with
yeah.
your product. Just the Indian market alone,
Yep.
you have the potential to make billions, trillions.
Hmm.
Well, imagine then you also get the opportunity to be able to get into the Chinese economy.
Yeah.
Well, I'm assuming, I could be completely wrong, but I'm assuming that at some point, if you're getting the BRICS nations now saying to the Middle Eastern countries, look, stop doing your business in dollars. You know where that's going. You know that
Hmm.
the dollar is the dollar is no longer really realistically a viable a viable currency.
Correct.
The debt ceiling is so high, it's got no value. It's just a current of money rather than it being a weight, rather than it being any value.
Mm,
What if they had one currency between them? What if those? Okay, sorry about that.
Well,
One of my books just fell behind me. What if they said, like Europe, we'll just have one currency, and we'll do our business that way? Wouldn't that be? And they're not, they're not Libya. Do you know what I mean?
yeah.
They're not. They're
I,
not.
I was that was my next thing I was gonna say.
Oh, sorry,
Yeah,
go on.
because that's what they I think Libya was
Yeah.
looking at doing a united African
Mm.
currency, and then they found themselves liberated. So yeah,
No, I shouldn't laugh at that because that's
no,
terrible.
no, no,
But,
obviously not,
but
no, but you know what I
but
mean.
what I mean is,
Yeah.
you're so right. I think I laughed more for the fact that even with doing a live stream, so that I don't fall foul of any strikes or any potential obstacles with sharing out the video. You have to be very political in the way in which you speak, and
Okay.
so
Mhm.
I knew exactly what you meant when you
Yeah,
said
yeah,
that,
yeah,
and I
yeah,
hope the viewers will understand as well without us going, what they
yeah,
did.
yeah, 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 yeah.
But I think that the current nations that
So,
formed,
my point on the single currency for them,
yeah,
I think that will be. I think that's going to be a bit of a problem. I think that'll be a sticking point. Um,
oh,
there are
because
so many countries like India, for example, that deal in cash.
yeah.
They're cash countries, right?
Mhm.
Yeah, I don't know how you're gonna.
No. What I meant was is I obviously
Maybe
I
for in just trade, I guess possibly. Maybe I don't know. I'm not
well when
sure.
I went to Cuba a few years ago, and when I went there, they had the localized peso and convertible ones. So there
Mm,
was the local pesos that was used between the people, and then there was the
okay.
pesos that us foreigners used.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I as Cuba was a communist country, that's the system of how it worked,
Hmm, hmm.
and it worked. I mean, I don't know if it works anymore. I'm
Yeah.
just saying that
So they could take some that kind of idea.
if China
Yeah, yeah,
were
yeah.
to, if because obviously China would be the sticking point, because I think I know you said about cash, but the other nations
Mm,
could work with that. The sticking point would be how would China work with that, because the other countries are not communist.
mhm,
And
mhm,
so it would be very interesting and yeah, I get that. And obviously I'm not an economist. I wouldn't know the ins and outs of how that would, the mechanics of how that would
mhm.
work.
Yep.
But actually, who knows? It might work, but I
Mm,
would imagine they would, the economists that they have there will be able to say, look, this is how we're going to make this work,
yeah.
because we need to untether ourselves from the dollar. And I think that this was the first shot. The first shots were fired with the Middle East being told to stop using the dollar.
Mm,
And that to me is what's frightening, because if they decide to not use the dollar,
yep.
where does that leave the dollar?
Yeah, I hear you, but I think it's like with the banks, they're not
Yeah.
going to allow the banks to fail. I can't see that the dollar's going to fail. That this video,
Mm,
this live may age very badly. But I'm just saying, I don't see how, with the United States behind it,
mhm.
um, it would fail as a currency. I can't see it. Maybe
Well,
they will do some debt forgiveness or
yeah,
and reset the clock or something. I don't know, but just
that would
saying.
be very interesting to see that if they were to do that. It would be very interesting. And maybe that's for
Well,
another.
who do they owe the money to?
Who owe the money to?
America.
They owe it to the world, don't they?
Hmm?
So who so
If
when
they've
you
got a debt, if they've got a debt that's 36 trillion, who
yeah,
is 36 trillion owed to?
so all of the countries that have bought in with their the bonds, not the bonds, what are they called?
T bills.
Yeah, that they have, before those economy, as we know, as I said at the very beginning, those countries originally pegged their money to gold, didn't they?
Hmm. Yep.
Then once they untethered from gold, America just printed money for fun, but with the promise that it would be guaranteed. So obviously, the government, give
Hmm.
that money. Um, I give that money value.
Yeah.
Well, on that premise, the countries around the world bought into it. So they bought the bonds. They bought into that Federal Reserve world. They said, okay, that's fine. We'll buy your bonds. You'll pay us back later, right? Yeah, of course we will. Okay, then. And then
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
so
Okay.
so that concept of debt it's owed to everybody. At the moment, I think the biggest owner of those bonds is China.
China. Right.
And
So
and
again, this is what I mean by a kind of, well, I was saying it in jest.
yeah,
If everything is so interconnected,
it'll be very
how
difficult.
would
Yeah,
it would be very difficult for it to fail, if that makes sense, because
yeah.
then they'll
Well,
catch the
well,
cold in China.
the only
China
thing I
then pass it to India. Blah blah blah.
the only thing I could think of is so if you run a sensible economy. So let's just, I know it's going to sound slightly off topic, but imagine you're Norway, right? You've you've found lots of oil, you've got loads of natural gas, you have a really good economy, and you have a sovereign fund. And you say, look, guys, Norwegian people, we're not going to spend that money.
Hmm.
We are going to save it. More importantly, we're going to invest it in key places that guarantees us a return. Yeah.
Yep.
And we're not going to have a space program. We're not going to have a crazy war machine. We're not going to try and, um, waste money, right?
Mm.
So you do that. And then later on, when the economies of the world all fail, we have done enough to cushion us. We've done enough to ride out that problem.
Mm.
I believe, could be totally wrong, and I'll probably be corrected by someone, but I believe that countries like China probably have the biggest reserve fund that has ever existed in the history of human life. I don't believe that they have gone, oh, I know what, all this money that we've made, let's just waste it all on the Belt and Road Initiative. No, I think that they have a sovereign fund that that's, I think that the Belt and Road Initiative is probably the surplus of the surplus,
Mm.
because they currently are going through a housing crash. They're still around.
Yep. But that's
and
that's
and
interesting you say
and,
that.
and China can't. China doesn't
Yeah.
have the same. China can't go to the IMF and say, "Oh, bail us out, help us out." They've
No, but
helped themselves out.
the-
Have
I
you
was
heard
just going
China
to say,
struggling?
they with that housing crisis,
Yeah,
the accountancy books was kind of like what I was just suggesting about with America. They literally just, they don't have that problem anymore.
exactly.
They
It was just,
it's just, yeah. Go
the
on.
rest of the world, and it's funny. The rest of the world was saying, "Oh, is it Evergreen?
Evergrande, or I think it was
Or whatever
Evergrande.
Evergrande,
Yeah,
whatever
yeah.
the company's name is. Oh, this is the worst thing in the entire world.
Hmm.
This is the worst thing that could ever happened in the history of, because they were comparing the size of this company, they were comparing it to what happened in America, which
Yeah,
makes perfect sense.
yeah.
And obviously in a capitalist economy, when something like that fails,
Yeah.
it just gets eaten up. It's an
Mm.
eat world. It just gets eaten up and move on. But in a communist situation, the only thing bigger than that company will be the government that which runs the country.
Yeah.
And I said this years ago. I was like, I'm not even worried. I genuinely don't. Have you ever, China should be in recession. I'm sorry. If you've got all those billions of people who bought houses off
Mhm.
plans,
Yep.
you know, I bought a house off a plan that it might get built in 5 years' time. The
Mm.
confidence that they have, there hasn't, there hasn't been riots on the streets.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? We haven't had another T Square, yeah.
Yeah.
We've had
Well, yeah.
we had a
Thankfully,
little,
yeah.
from what we know,
Hmm. Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
from what we know, that hasn't happened.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And from what I understand, China's still going smoothly, which makes me
Mm.
think they probably have their own sovereign fund. They'll be able to ride out. They'll ride this
So
out.
there's something to be said about a government or a nation that takes the money that they earn and kind of invest it in people rather than a specific industry.
Yeah,
So maybe like in the UK, for example, the banks get bailed out, financial industries get bailed out,
but
and the
we
same in
don't.
America. Yeah, and you see the result of that. It hasn't built us up. It hasn't made us strong because we're still weak. Yeah,
Yeah,
but
and
those emerging economies investing in the people in a sense, and they've got, I think China's got more sort of a millionaire class that's burgeoning because they're putting the money into like the manufacturing and whatnot. So
but to me, from it's going to sound strange, but I feel like if you were to go back in time, if you were to go back um to America post Second World War, the American machine invested in people. It
mm,
invested in infrastructure.
yep.
It was self-sufficient. It could do everything it wanted to. It didn't have to worry about interconnecting markets because it was its own market. It
Mm,
sold its surplus and benefited the people. And
yep.
that journey, we've seen it go full circle. You know, they then suddenly went, well, we now need to offshore this. We need to send this industry to another country to make it cheaper. And by doing that, you then suddenly in the sense of in the 70s, the Americans started to do work with the Chinese economy started to grow. America now doesn't have the industry it had. Britain done the same thing, has no
Mm.
industries because it's sent them all over the world, and we enjoy the cheapness of it. But have we benefited long term? Of course not.
I think the game plan was to offshore those types of
Offshore, so that's
works,
yeah,
right, and invest in the financial markets. So we
yeah,
became overly dependent.
yeah,
Speaking for the UK in particular, um, in banking and the financial services industry,
mm,
and everything else went. Um, yeah,
yeah.
and now we're seeing the fallout from that really. So
And so from our perspective, and obviously we live in Europe, and we are looking at it from the through the eyes of the West. The BRICS is now a major player. My question to you is this: now that BRICS is established, it has more members part of it. Do you think that it will one day supplant the G7 and will then now become the major player in the world economy and the sort of the geopolitical world? Do you think it will supplant G7, G20 nations?
um, I think that the G7, the G20, they're not going to go down without a fight, and you're going to see the soft power start going into action. And I think yes is the short answer,
Hmm.
but I think it would be very difficult, and there will be a lot of bumps along the way because a lot of the countries that these people are going to try to create ties with will already have long-standing relationships with parts of the West. Do you see what I mean? So, I mean, it's interesting to note that as of like I think last month, in only January to February, um, 36 countries have applied to join the BRICS.
What?
36 countries have, yeah, serious, yeah.
36.
36 countries have applied to join. So that's why I say the short answer is yes, but I
Wow.
don't think it's going to be as simple as, add more countries and then we end up taking over. It's a game of geopolitics, and
This is what I
there's a lot of
mean.
there's a lot of chess involved.
So I feel like that new development bank and the what's it called, contingent reserve arrangement they've got
Mhm.
is going to be in full effect over the next few years, because these will no doubt be emerging markets. These will no
That's
doubt
right.
be
Yeah, for
countries with
sure.
much smaller GDPs that have seen the potential
That's right. Yeah,
that they probably won't get in the G20, G7s, because their GDPs are too small.
yeah,
They're not. They don't have the financial clout to be able to step to that. But BRICS is probably going to say, "Hey, come to us,
mm.
be
I
part of
mean,
our body."
yeah, they're obviously going to pick the countries that are going to make the best sense for them. They may only take 6 of those 36, but
But
it's
still,
interesting
they can
the
cherry pick.
appetite that's out there
Yeah, that's
to
very
be part
interesting.
of it. That's it's showing where a lot of the rest of the world are going. Like, there's a
And I feel like if that's going to be now, if that is now the reality, where
mm,
you know, if you were part of the G7, if you're part of the G20, I mean, don't get me wrong, there are G20, there are G20 that are in the, isn't there G20 countries that they're part of the BRICS anyway? The part the are there? I
yeah,
think
I'm sure
they
there will be.
interconnect, don't they? They interconnect. But what I'm
That's
saying is that this is like our own part. This is the potential to start something new
mm,
now up until 2050, and it's completely separate. I
yeah.
believe that mine and your lifetime, we probably will see a new financial system in play, because I don't think we can carry on doing what we're doing. The debt ceilings in countries just can't. We can't just keep increasing that ceiling, because
Yeah,
we're indebting our children's children.
yeah. I mean, BRICS
That
aside, that's I think that's already in motion anyway. I think
sorry,
a
what's
lot of
died?
I'm saying BRICS aside,
Oh, BRICS aside. Sorry,
yeah,
yeah,
I believe that we're looking at the end of the financial system as we know it anyway, and
that's quite
what's
scary,
coming
isn't
in.
it?
Uh,
Because you mentioned last week the basic
oh, UBI,
UBI, yeah,
yeah,
universal basic income. No,
hmm yeah,
and,
yeah,
and I said to you then, oh man, that would be a fate worse than death. I think, in the sense of, will it stifle productivity? If you know that you're going to get something, why go out of your way to do anything? If you know, oh, by the end of the week I'll get that, would you try? But there will probably be a different system. But the system we
I,
have
I,
right now,
I don't think so. I think you. I don't. I think the people that would sit down and just take and wait for that, they probably are like that already. I don't think it's going to make the average person, because if you say you or I was getting that, your brain's thinking, well, if this 2 grand a month, that's on top of my wages, you're already calculating in your head.
yeah.
How you wouldn't just say, oh, okay, I don't need to work now, let me just live on the 2 grand. You're
Speak for yourself,
thinking
brother.
I don't. Well, yeah. I don't think that would be the. I don't think
No,
that
I
would be
get that. I think
most
what it
people.
is that we as a species, we will always try to, we want to better ourselves. We want to, and we'll probably say we want, for us, we wanted to give our children a better life than the one that we had.
Yeah,
We want to give them what we didn't get. The generations that are coming are going to get to a point where they won't be able to do that. That to me is the saddest thing. That
yeah.
they will get. I think that we're getting to that point where they won't be able to do that.
Mm,
You know,
mm,
whereby the generations before, they may not have been able to read. They can read. They may not be able to drive. They cannot afford a car. They're to own their own home. They can own a home.
Mhm.
But the children of tomorrow will just be laden with so many things that they may not be able to better what
Yeah,
their parents did, or worse
I
still,
think
what
that's
their
already. I think
grandparents did.
that's already here, isn't it? That sort of. I think the young people, the Gen Z, is it? The millennials,
Okay,
they're already in that space. So I think we're already here. That's why I think that there will be some type of reset and a crash and
a great
burn of
reason.
the a crash and burn of the old system,
Yeah,
and a slight sort of change and implementation of this new thing that will all be digital. Yeah.
wow. So we've spoken for the last nearly hour or so about the BRICS nations, and I would imagine that the acronyms have to change if they've got 36 new
Bricks.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
bricks that don't break.
Yeah,
This long line of
yeah.
acronym, yeah, because it's Indonesia and it's
Hmm.
Japan, But this is the interesting thing. It's, we said at the very, very beginning of the discussion, we are not economists, we are not geopolitical analysts or specialists or anything like that. We are
Definitely not.
just people that observe the world as we see it, and we like to talk about it. And to be honest with you, if we said anything that you disagree with, put it in the comments. If you agree with us, get the thumbs up. Um, we're learning in our own. We would talk like this whether we were on screen or not.
Yeah,
That's the
yeah,
thing.
100%. Yeah, yeah.
This is why I love having you on the show, because whether we would whether I was on the phone to you or whether we were, talking face to
It's
face,
literally is a normal conversation that we have.
normal
Yeah,
conversation.
yeah, yeah. For real.
Maybe we'd probably I suppose the only thing is we'd probably be a little bit more,
We'll be dancing around the algorithm a little
yeah,
less. Yeah, 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 for sure.
that yeah. I think that's the only thing is, obviously there are certain things that I wouldn't want to trigger the algorithm gods into condemning a video. So not but I still believe that we would still have these kind of conversations and talk about it.
Mm.
Um, we have lots of subjects. If there's a subject that you would like us to talk about, please put it in the comments and say, because we have our own ideas of what we'd like to talk about. If you've got an idea and you think, do you know what, I'd like to hear the opinion of two other guys, by all means put that in the comments, because I think that'll be helpful for us. Because we will pretty much, we could discuss, we've already got a lot of subjects lined up. um, we were going to talk about something completely different, and then this came in and we said, let's talk about that. Okay,
Mm.
let's do that. So if you have a subject that you think would be worth a discussion, please let us know. Put it in the comments, and we will definitely, give it some thought and maybe do some research, have a conversation about it. Have you seen my t-shirt?
I did wonder if it was a.
It
It
is me
looked like
in the
okay,
shape. Can you see it? Baldy.
Baldy. I did wondering why you're wearing an Audi shirt. I was gonna talk
Not
offline
Aldi,
and
it's Baldy.
yeah,
It
yeah,
was
yeah. I got it.
my
I
wife
got
gave
it.
it to me.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
believe it was Will. Yes, I think it was. Yeah, she gave it to me, so I thought I'd wear it today. Right. So thank you so much for tuning in to the Small YouTuber Show. Um, we do talk about all different subjects, different topics. If it's maybe it could be about the algorithm, it could be about someone's channel. We are, or should I say, I will be back on live later on this evening with another show where we'll be talking to another YouTuber. It's going to be awesome. I don't want to give away too much right now, but any concluding comments before we go, LD?
It'll be interesting to see what happens this October. There will be a BRICS summit that Russia is chairing in October this year. So
Ah,
there'll
yes,
be a lot
because isn't it that
comes out
the
from.
the presidential the president of BRICS changes every 12 months?
Yeah,
So South
something like
Africa,
that.
it was in South Africa had it, and now it reverts to
Russia, I
Russia.
believe. Yeah,
Yeah, so it will be
yeah.
interesting. So that's going to be that'll be an interesting thing. Well,
Because
maybe we'll bring.
one of the things at their table topping, it will be about the financial system that they want to bring in. So we probably hear about the currency then.
So
Yeah,
maybe we'll have to revisit this conversation once we've
yeah,
got all the nuts and bolts of that summit.
indeed, indeed.
Cool. All right, guys. Well, thank you so much for tuning in. If you are watching the replay, thank you so much for watching the replay and I hope that this has given you some value and that you have enjoyed the show. We will see you again next week for another show. Take care. Have a great rest of the weekend, and we'll see you then. Take care.